The Nintendo Switch is a great system that I obviously love to play and talk about, but let's be realistic about one thing with it. A graphical powerhouse, it ain't. Sure, I feel a vast majority of the games look good enough, and sometimes you get some really impressive ones, but there's a reason why people seem hungry for something like a Nintendo Switch Pro. People like better graphics. With the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X looming on the horizon, and might even be out depending on when you're watching this video, the Nintendo Switch will obviously have an uphill battle when it comes to the graphics department. But what if there was a plug-and-play way to make your Nintendo Switch games look better? A company called Marseille has a range of products, one of them being the mClassic. Now, we actually have talked about their products before on the channel with the M cable, when using the Eon N64 HDMI adapter, and honestly, I kinda like this cable. It was annoying that it wouldn't let you play N64 games that utilized the expansion pack when you were using the cable, but games like Super Mario 64 definitely looked a lot better and crisper when using the M cable through the Eon N64 HDMI adapter than without it. The mClassic is another product that they have recently released, which is essentially a plug-and-play device that will allegedly enhance your HDMI consoles, and a lot of marketing for this product and talk about this product goes along with the Nintendo Switch, considering there are many Nintendo Switch games that run in sub 1080p docked. Allegedly, this $100 mClassic product will sharpen images, upscale them, add anti-aliasing, and much more. Now, I'm not a huge tech head, I'm an everyday gamer, and while a lot of my friends have talked previously about this device, I decided to finally give my impressions on it. So is this device a miracle solution that makes your Nintendo Switch games look better? Let's find out. When you get the mClassic, it comes in a nice little box with a dongle inside, and you can see the shape of it. There's some ports on it that we'll talk about in just a moment, but the design of the product itself seems decent enough. It doesn't feel cheap or anything like that. It also comes with two cables, and since I've actually been using the product, well, they're not wrapped up nice, but they do come wrapped up with little twisty ties when you first open it. The first cable is an HDMI extender, and the second cable is a power supply. You could plug it in via a power brick or with a USB port on your computer or television, and it does work with USB 3.0 and USB 2.0. The device itself, like I said, does have a pretty good build quality to it, and you can see where you plug in various things in order to make it work. There's also a switch, no pun intended, on the device that allows you to use either standard HDMI signal or the enhanced one from the mClassic device. Now, as much as they talk about the Nintendo Switch and the marketing of this product, you would think it would fit nice and snug in your Nintendo Switch, but it doesn't at all. The pieces on the side prevent it from being a true plug-and-play sort of thing, and that's where you have to use the extender. Then of course you have to plug in the power supply, and you essentially have a black and orange snake of wires coming from this device in order to play it on your Nintendo Switch. Now, this isn't a big deal at all. I'm a messy person to begin with, but if they would have just chopped down the side of it a little bit, it would have fit it perfectly in the Nintendo Switch, and you wouldn't have even needed the extender. Now, of course, what really matters on this device is how the games look, because that's sort of the whole point of the device itself. For this video, everything was captured on an Elgato HD 60S at 1080p with the highest visual settings. There was no post-production done to any of these videos that you're going to see. Also, while I did mention that you can play with the native HDMI signal with this device plugged in, I decided to record the standard HDMI footage with a separate cable and the device not plugged in, just in case there was any sort of discrepancies. I decided to take a look at a bunch of different games, some at a standstill and some in motion. Finally, the games I chose have a variety of native resolutions. Games like Super Mario Odyssey are 900p docked, Doom is 720p docked, and since this does upscale to up to 4K as stated on their website, this will apply to these games in 1080p as well. First off, let's take a look at Super Mario Odyssey. For this, I decided to just, well, stand still in a place in New Donk City. First, we will see the footage with the mClassic dongle, and then we will see it with the standard HDMI cable. Each piece of footage will be marked accordingly throughout this video. I thought this was a nice little backdrop because of the fact that it's rather lively, and this is one of my favorite levels in a Mario game ever. At first glance, I honestly didn't notice a major difference, if any, so I took a screenshot and put them side by side. In a still image, I think you can see that there is a tad bit of difference. With the mClassic, the colors look a bit more vibrant, especially the green on the safety exit, and things look a tad bit sharper as far as the resolution is concerned as well. The yellow on the taxi cab also pops a smidge more. If you zoom in, you can see that textures do look a bit sharper and all that with the mClassic, and that's obviously due to the enhanced sharpening that this device offers, but I'm not quite sure that it really shows when you put the game in motion. Next up, let's take a look at The Witcher 3 for the Nintendo Switch. I also went with a more cinematic shot for this game because I've just been going through and doing quests that I'm way over leveled for. Now, The Witcher 3 has a ton of options on the Nintendo Switch for post-production stuff that Saber Interactive actually added in the game post-launch, and I kept those the exact same when recording footage for both of these clips. Once again, I feel that there's a very small difference between these two pieces of footage, aside from the camera angle, but beyond that, it's honestly really hard to tell any sort of major difference with the mClassic being used and not used. I will say the ground texture does look a little sharper in the still image when using the mClassic than the standard HDMI output, and the brick does look a little bit cleaner too, but once again, you have to factor in that will you be able to see that when you're in motion versus when you're not in motion? That really remains to be seen. Now let's take a look at Sonic the Hedgehog 2 via the Sega Genesis Classics Collection. You might be saying to yourself, well, why in the hell would you choose this game? But I think there's a very valid reason. Colors. Sonic 2 is rather rich in colors and is a game I'm very familiar with, so I was interested to see what sort of difference there would be with the mClassic versus a standard HDMI. I think one thing we can establish thus far with all the footage that we've seen from the mClassic is that this device seems to be adjusting things like contrast and sharpness with the games we've been playing and changing them to look a bit more cleaner. But theoretically speaking, you can sort of do that with your television or your monitor in the first place, which of course has these sort of options. I will say I was kind of surprised that Sonic 2 ran and looked pretty much identical when you're talking about things like color, especially the blue background, because I figured the mClassic would have tweaked it a bit like it does with the other colors like we saw with Super Mario Odyssey and that green exitway. Maybe it's just not as pronounced as it was in Super Mario Odyssey because of the fact that this is a 16-bit game, but still. The Outer Worlds recently came out on the Nintendo Switch, and well, it looks downright ugly at points. Thankfully, the game itself is fantastic, and I managed to power through these muddy graphics, but I was definitely interested to see what the mClassic could do in terms of sharpening, because there's a lot of blurry textures in this game. And much like most of the footage we've seen so far, the difference was pretty negligible. I took a small stroll through the same area with both using the mClassic and the standard HDMI signal, and noticed a few differences. A few of the colors looked a little bit brighter with the mClassic. The brick on the ground looked a little bit sharper as well, but for the most part, there really wasn't a difference that was really super noticeable to me unless you're specifically looking for that difference. The side-by-side still image shows what I'm talking about a bit more, but still, I couldn't help but feel that you would need to do things like zoom in on the image to notice something really substantial, which is fine, it means that the product is working, but that doesn't really play into the practicality of it because, well, you're not going to be playing a game zoomed in on your TV or your monitor. And finally, we have Doom on the Nintendo Switch, and I just did an arcade run on this, and I'm just going to sort of talk over this footage because I feel like you could sort of get what I'm getting at with this device. Now, is there a difference between using something like a standard HDMI signal versus the mClassic? Yeah. Is there enough of a difference to warrant buying this device for $100? Well, that really depends, I feel. I don't think the mClassic is necessarily a bad product. I think it's built well enough, and there is a difference at times in terms of visual fidelity, but I feel like the average person won't really be able to see these differences. The main thing this device seems to tinker with are things like sharpness, anti-aliasing, color, and contrast, and three of those things you could simply adjust on your television or your monitor to sort of mimic what this device does. On bigger televisions, it is a tad bit more noticeable, which is a good thing, but looking at things like the comparison shots that they showcase on their website, I just can't help but feel that it's not really indicative of what this product does at all. While it does enhance things incrementally, the $100 price point just feels a bit too high for this device, and it won't make an impact for a large majority of Nintendo Switch owners. So is the mClassic the savior of the Nintendo Switch? Will this make all of your games look better? I think you could just look at the footage and sort of decide for yourself. You got to remember, everyone sort of sees things differently. There's things like different sorts of visions. There's people that are colorblind. But at the end of the day, I feel like this does have a small increase in Nintendo Switch visuals, but to me, it's not really worth that $100 price point. You're not going to get something a whole hell of a lot better than you're already getting on your standard television. And with your standard television, you can do things like adjust the contrast and the brightness and the color saturation and of course the sharpness to sort of mimic what this device does. I don't think it's a bad product, but I just don't think it really brings to the table this sort of huge jump that Nintendo Switch owners were maybe hoping for with this device. Now, like I said, a lot of my friends have reviewed this device and they seem to be pretty happy with it, so that's good on them. And they do have the other device, the mCable, that of course we talked about earlier, and that does work with the Nintendo Switch as well. So if this video does well and you guys are interested, I'll actually put up the mCable to the mClassic to an HDMI signal and see if there's a difference in that. Now the mCable is a bit more expensive than the mClassic is, so do keep that in mind. So just let me know in the comments section down below if that's sort of a comparison that you guys would like to see. And as always guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out other videos on the channel, and most importantly, let me know what you think of this device in the comments section down below. Do you own one of these? Have you been using one of these? Do you feel like it is worth the $100 investment, or are you sort of like me and just think that the jump just isn't quite good enough? And as always guys, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.